In early June 1987, the residents of an apartment building in downtown St. Louis succumbed to a phenomenon previously unrecorded. 2 died of unknown symptoms, others sick for days for no discernible reason, and 1 resident driven to madness and suicide. There are several theories: a poisonous gas, a deadly mold, perhaps even a biological attack. Or was there something even more sinister at play?
When an abandoned industrial building is cleared for demolition, a locked door is discovered in its basement. The door conceals an archive of strange and disturbing specimens, recordings, photos, and documentary films. Compelling evidence of monstrous creatures and preternatural events. The documentarian's whereabouts remain unknown. In his records, he identifies himself only as the Teller. His investigations reveal the frightening world of dark secrets.
Wednesday, June 2nd, 1987. As the city of St. Louis, Missouri is preparing for sleep, the residents of the apartment building, the Havenhurst, are beginning to feel an illness. An anxiety like no other. Some believe it is because their beloved Cardinals lost 4-1 to the visiting Phillies. Others assume it is merely food poisoning.
Havenhurst case. That's an odd story. We get a call one night from this woman saying that she'd been poisoned and that her husband had been poisoned. I sent over a patrol car and an ambulance.
It soon becomes evident that the couple in Unit 3 are not the only tenants suffering. Whatever it is, it's spreading fast.
I got the fire department to work with me. We get there, and there's all these other sick people everywhere. When we started cordoning off the areas.
It is a disturbing situation. Detective Kimsey and his patrolmen checked the rest of the units.
We got everyone out of the building, and just to make sure, we combed the whole building to see if there was anybody left, anybody hiding, anybody scared, anything like that. We checked out the whole building. It wasn't until we were sweeping the 8th floor of the Havenhurst when we heard it. Gunshot.
The sound echoes throughout the building, reverberating through the oversized shaft that forces air into the stuffy apartments.
Hudson was the first one to find the body.
Kimsey is quick to assign guilt. He believes this closed-air building is perfect for a terrorist attack.
We thought perhaps that he was the perpetrator, and that he put something through the shaft that made everybody sick. And I guess he figured that he'd rather just off himself right there instead of going to jail. And so he shot himself.
An autopsy reveals something strange, but the higher-ups refuse to release any information. Kimsey leans on the coroner for the truth.
All of his organs were crushed. Like jelly, like goo. All of his insides were a mess.
37-year-old Ted Brescher is innocent. Kimsey now believes he suffered the same affliction as the others, and the excruciating pain drove him to suicide.
And then the CDC, and the Army, even the gas company. They went through that place for 2 weeks, and nobody could find anything.
Although no evidence of any hazardous substance is ever discovered, those who stay in the building for too long begin to experience the same symptoms. All science fails to find an explanation, but another option remains: the supernatural. The owner of the building is a deeply devout Catholic and contacts his priest. Father Joseph Bregman is still troubled by the Havenhurst incident.
It was widely known in St. Louis what had happened. There was a thought by my parishioner, whose name I have to keep secret for confidentiality reasons, that the building might be possessed. Exorcisms are not given as a matter of right by the Catholic Church. They're only performed when there is no scientific reason for the possession. That is, a possession by an evil spirit.
With the blessing of the local archdiocese, Father Bregman enters the accursed building on June 25th, 1987.
I was armed with my crucifix. my Bible, holy water. I had incense that I burned, and I was prepared to do battle with the devil.
For over 16 hours, Father Bregman reads the rites, shouts prayers, and fights the devil.
I could feel my strength starting to ebb. But what's terrified me, my mind began to wander, began to have hallucinations. I began to lose my faith in God. And at that point, I lost consciousness.
A fellow priest goes up to check on Father Bregman and finds him convulsing on the floor, coughing, racked with the same symptoms. He is losing his holy battle. Tenants in the Havenhurst apartments have come down with a mysterious and deadly illness. Father Joseph Bregman attempts to exorcise any demons in the building, but he also falls victim to the strange disease. He is taken to St. Anthony's Hospital, where doctors and priests work their respective trades. After a few days, he makes a full recovery.
Being a scientist, I'm always looking for some sort of scientific explanation for everything.
Oliver Jensen is a well-known paranormal investigator in the St. Louis area. The police are getting desperate for answers.
We can, most of the time, debunk any sort of paranormal explanation. But in this case, clearly something was going on in this building. I knew that I wasn't going to spend the night there, and I wasn't working for anybody.
Jensen has developed highly sensitive audio recording devices that can detect and amplify the faintest sounds. He usually hopes to hear the whisperings of the dead. This time, he would capture something very different. He sets his equipment to record for 12 consecutive hours in the Havenhurst. He then brings his gear back to his home laboratory to analyze the findings.
As I'm laying there and I'm listening to the sound, I can't hear anything. It's literally hours upon hours of just pure silence. But the longer that I laid there, the worse and worse I started to feel. I started to get headaches. My body was trembling. I started coughing as well. My chest, it just felt overcome. And I'm laying there and I just keep listening and I hear nothing, but I just get getting worse. And finally, I just passed out.
Unlike the other victims, Jensen's symptoms get worse, not better, when he leaves the building.
And I don't know how long it was later, but when I awoke, I felt better. But I still had the headache, but I definitely felt better. And I had noticed that the recording equipment had stopped playing.
Jensen is about to have his eureka moment.
I'm not listening to the recording device anymore. And now the effects are starting to go away. What could this be? And that was it right there. That was the moment when I was like, okay, here we are. I started thinking back on the research that I had done on Dr. Vladimir Gavreau. He was a scientist back in the 1950s and 60s, and in his lab, a lot of his assistants were getting sick. He couldn't figure out what was going on, and it turned out that there was some sort of fan blade that was going, right? And it was causing everyone to get sick, and he started to realize that it was actually the tone that it was creating in the room, okay? So the tone itself was actually interfering with the actual human body, and that's why people were getting sick. So he started to do experiments, and eventually he had discovered the actual resonance tone of the human body.
Everything in the universe is vulnerable to its own unique frequency. That principle explains the dramatic destruction of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940. As the wind whipped through the open structure, a very low-frequency tone was generated. Sound waves, matching frequencies that interact and transform the sound into destructive kinetic energy. Nature's dissonant note. It's little wonder the internal organs of the Havenhurst residents were pulverized.
It's what's known as forced resonance. It's basically the same thing as when an opera singer sings and can shatter glass, or you hear a cannon boom echoing through the mountains and it causes an avalanche. Essentially what was happening in this building, it was being used as a Helmholtz resonator.
Yeah, I don't really understand the science. All I know is I got a bunch of dead bodies. laying around a building. Nobody can figure out what did it. And this paranormal guy is telling me that there's some special sound that's killing everybody. So I'm willing to listen to him. All I want to know is it intentional?
After Jansen's revelation, the police examined the building's fan and ventilation system.
So I took my information to the city planner. And so we got out the blueprints and we matched them up. And it turns out that somebody had taken the sound baffling out around the fan.
Hello, I'm Pierre Durand. And what would you like me to tell you?
I decide to dig deeper into Dr. Gavreau's experiments. Durand is my guy. He was there.
Well, my name is Pierre Durand, and the time it was in 1957. Between 1957 and 1960, I was working under Dr. Gavreau, Vladimir Gavreau. Now I can tell you about the project, but at the time, of course, everything was very confidential. We were trying to create a robot, a mobile robot, that will be designed to go on warfare. A soldier. Basically, like the kind of science fiction films you see on in the movies and in the theaters, where you have modern robots going after troops. So it was a very ambitious project.
However, the scientist in Gavreau's lab kept succumbing to a strange sickness.
Most of the people that were working in the lab were actually getting atrocious headaches. I mean, nausea. And what a strange thing that everybody in the lab was actually going through this.
Apparently, a fan being used in the robotics lab had one loose blade that caused it to generate a low-frequency sound, the source of their illness. It eventually proved to be far more troubling than they could ever imagine. Residents of the Havenhurst apartments have suffered the same illness as a team of French military scientists back in 1957. Dr. Vladimir Gavreau, the head of the French team, had been perplexed for months.
And then Dr. Gavreau finally realized what was the problem. This low frequency was creating all this, what I would call mental and physical damage to us.
Consider the visible spectrum. Ultraviolet is the color above visual perception, and infrared is the color below visual perception. The same holds true for sound. Ultrasound is high-frequency sound above human perception, like a dog whistle, and infrasound is below human hearing, like the low hum the fan is emitting.
We just made an amazing discovery. We just discovered that actually a certain level of low frequency, sound frequency, could be damaging to humankind. So bingo, now we have a weapon.
Gavreau scraps the robotic warfare program and begins work on something far less expensive and potentially more deadly: destructive harmonic audio resonance.
So we finally came out with a 7 hertz frequency, which is basically the same frequency as brain waves. Also your organs are at 7 hertz frequency. Many things.
7 hertz, the frequency of the offending fan. 7 hertz, the frequency of human organs. 7 hertz, the median alpha rhythm of the human brain.
We had an assistant. His name was Saint-Marc, I believe. I don't remember his first name now, but he thought, if we're going to invent this kind of device, what we need is something to let us know if it's on or off.
Being proactive, lab assistant Claude Saint-Marc decides to work through the night. He is close to perfecting an infrasound warning system, a canary in the coal mine to keep them safe. His ironic mistake: he leaves the infrasonic weapon powered on.
So the assistant was passionate about it, and he worked late in the lab, and we were all gone, and he forgot to actually turn the weapon off. We basically came in the morning, we come into the lab, we walk in, and we see him. His eyes are red. He's just completely out of his mind. He just went crazy.
They find Saint-Marc convulsing violently on the floor. The young scientist is completely incoherent.
Unfortunately, he never recovered from what happened. I mean, the poor guy, that was the end. So we knew we had something in our hands that was quite powerful here.
Gavreau continued his work and eventually built prototypes of sonic weapons, including a 75-foot-long sound cannon. Over the years, other military and police departments have developed sonic weapons that emit harmful, pain-inducing tones. One weapon, known as the long-range acoustic device, is used to counter piracy on ships and is a non-lethal crowd control weapon. I believe this same technology was deployed against the tenants of the Havenhurst apartment building. But who could have done this? And the bigger question, why? A month has passed since the Havenhurst incident. Most are convinced infrasound is the reason for the illness, but some still hunt for an organic cause, like bacteria or mold. Mold grows well in moist areas like the ductwork associated with heating and air conditioning systems. It is often odorless, even while it attacks its victims, causing respiratory problems and even death. Mold detection professionals are required to confirm the danger. Joe Lutz was the building manager at the Havenhurst.
They were making some speculation maybe it was mold related, and I really didn't have an answer. And it was at that point that I called my brother, Ed, to come down, and he had a company for removal and mold cleanup. And he went through he spent some time there going through it. And
this part of the story is painful for Lutz to recount. On July 3rd, when Jansen is leaving with his audio gear, A1 mold removal arrives for what they think is a routine job.
When I started to put all the science together and realized exactly what was going on in this building, this became a very, very dire situation. I understood somebody had actually committed suicide. I knew about the priest. And when I understood exactly what was happening, I knew this is a very, very dangerous situation, and I needed to act immediately to get these mold guys out of there. I still knew that they were in the building.
Jensen now knows that the illness was caused by sound, not mold, and the protective gear the mold team is wearing offers little protection. The modern sealed building again becomes a tomb.
By the time I finally had arrived there, I walked up onto a scene. It was not a pretty sight. Clearly, these men had gone psychotic.
I got a phone call that Ed and his partner just they went nuts on each other. I mean, they killed each other. I mean, these guys, they just went. No one knows. They just, went nuts. They tore each other apart.
So, like Claude St. Mark, the mold removal team had fallen victim to the 7 Hz infrasound. Detective Kimsey presses for more information, more leads, and he gets them.
Police did what they normally do. They try to go backdoor and answer the same question 10 times. So it was consistent because I really didn't know anything per se about what was causing the issue. But they were kind of leaning towards the fact that maybe I had something to do with this, or if I had any interaction with the persons who had passed.
Right before these events happened, somebody had come in and replaced the existing fan with a new fan from the Prince of the Power fan company.
And I just assumed it was, the landlord had set it up to come in and check the AC. I hadn't got any complaints about the temperatures or anything, but I assumed that, it got wind to the property owner, and he contacted me, and I met up with the technician there, and he was going to, just take care of that, and, I showed him the equipment, and I thought that was it, but it wasn't.
Lutz is eventually cleared as a suspect, but the technician who installed the new fan has not. He worked for the Prince of the Power fan company, and all efforts to find him have thus far failed.
The Prince of the Power fan company does not exist. The paper trail came up short. We looked everywhere. No taxes, no tax franchise board, no Better Business Bureau, no licenses, no ads, nothing. It did not exist.
Close examination of the fan reveals it was purposely sabotaged to recreate the deadly 7 Hz infrasound. Perhaps Father Bregman was right all along. This is the work of evil, true evil. They discover that Prince of the Power is a reference from the Bible. St. Paul describes Satan as the prince of the power of the air in Ephesians. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Whether he be man or beast, he is on the prowl, and he's found a way to keep the roar silent.